Back live on the stage again, and this time around we have about a 45-minute presentation and chat by Boaz and Ashwin, the CEO as well as CTO of Simply Augmented. Boaz and Ashwin have spent over a decade in enterprise productivity and XR space. They're both ex Meta, and they have experience at Accenture as well. And now they're using AI to create productivity tools for various customers. Without butchering their introduction, I will let them come on stage and introduce themselves, and I will come back along with Roberto to wrap once these guys are done.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hi, I'm Boaz Ashkenazy, and this is Ashwin Kadaru. I'm the CEO of Simply Augmented, and we're super excited to be talking with you today. So a little bit about myself, and then Ashwin can give an intro. I've spent most of my career in startups, and then I was asked to join Meta right after the pandemic and worked really closely with Ashwin inside the enterprise engineering team where we built productivity tools for employees, did a lot of work with VR, AR, AI, and now we've broken off to start Simply Augmented. And basically we build AI custom applications for businesses that want a more private and secure AI experience for their employees. Ashwin, do you want to go next?
Cool. Yep. Hey, I'm Ashwin. I'm currently CTO of Simply Augmented. Prior to that, like Boaz mentioned, we were at Meta in the enterprise engineering division. We were building productivity tools, VR tools. I had a focus around security, specifically security in VR. And then prior to that, I was at Accenture building tons of different productivity tools for different customers in different industries. Some of that was VR, some of that was AR, and some of that was your regular automation tools.
So today we really want to talk a little bit about the way that XR and the experiences that both of us have had with XR are going to merge with AI now and in the future. And so we've tried to lay this out for you and give you some insights that we think about when we think about the way that these two things are coming together. So Ashwin, can you share your screen and then we'll get started?
Yeah, it should be presenting. There we go.
There we go. Awesome.
Cool. So I want to talk about an overview of where we see generative AI and XR together over the next decade or so. And so this is our view of a visual layer, application layer, the foundational models, and data layer. And I'll go through each of these one by one. So in a visual layer, we have our window into the digital world. This is our mobile devices, this is laptops and PCs, and now we have our XR devices. Today, the distribution is probably less on the XR devices side and more on mobile devices and laptops and PCs. But over the next decade or so, we may see a change in distribution for more people inside of XR devices. In our application layer, we can see we'll continue to have general applications, our normal applications that we have, virtual offices, your VR training experiences, engines like Unity, Unreal. But the difference here is that you may have an AI agent attached to these applications. And so this is a trend that we're starting to see where an AI assistant is fine-tuned for a specific application and it understands that specific application better than something that's more general purpose like a ChatGPT. And so for a virtual office, you may have an AI agent that helps you set up your windows or your environment based on what you're doing, what you're working on. It understands what you're doing, it can reorganize your setup. For VR training, you may have an AI assistant that helps you learn the material that you're trying to understand. And it could also maybe update the environment or update the training based on your skill level. And then with Unity, Unreal, and game engines, we've kind of already seen this with Unity's recent announcement of Muse, but you have a way to chat with Unity and have actions get taken by an AI agent. And so you're delegating animations, you're delegating some textures, sprites, code, and then eventually 3D objects and scenes themselves. And then all of these AI agents are generally going to be built on top of your foundational models. And these are things like your large language models, these are your diffusion models, other types of deep learning models. And this is a trend that we're seeing as well, where you don't want to necessarily have to talk to every application's AI assistant. that might get a little bit fatiguing. If I had to go and talk to one thing to learn about my training or learn about my employee experience or documentation side of my company, they're all different assistants. We don't necessarily want that. And so the trend that we're kind of seeing is you have this general purpose AI that is your main point of entry that can hook into these other specialized AI agents. And it's delegating the tasks on your behalf. And we're kind of seeing this today with Microsoft's Copilot. They have a base AI assistant that can hook into other enterprise systems. Finally, we have our data layer, and if you know AI needs data to be impactful. And not only that, you could have an AI assistant that pulls data or pulls information from different systems. And so an example of what I mean by this is if I'm in a VR training experience, maybe my AI assistant goes and understands my skills profile, understands my learning management content that I've finished, and can update or generate a scene based on my skill level. And then the other part here is, let me change this. So this is another trend that we're seeing is multimodality. Today, a lot of the hype that we're seeing is around text to text. That is ChatGPT, that is Bard, that is AI assistants where I input some text and I get some text out. And one thing that I want us to think about is there's a lot of other inputs and outputs that we're going to start to see. We've already started to see text to image, some text to sound. There's not a whole lot of text to 3D models that is a little bit harder to solve, but you can imagine use cases where I input an image and maybe from that image I get a 3D model. Like if I say, here's an image of a car, can you generate a 3D model for me? Or here's an image, can you create a video for me? You may have a 3-second video that you input and say, extend this video to make it 10 seconds. Or you speak into an audio clip and you say, clone this voice for me and create a voiceover for my application. So we're going to start to see a multimodal AI experience come, but it will take a lot of time.
And I want to reiterate that there's been a lot of buzz and hype around AI this last year. And I want to kind of recognize why we're here talking about this right now, because a lot of machine learning has existed inside companies for a long time. They've existed inside Meta, they've existed inside Amazon and Google and Microsoft. But why all of a sudden are we talking about this now? And I think the main reason why is because of the generative part and what happened last year with OpenAI. And this idea that we can all have these kinds of agents, these AI assistants in our pockets at all time, no matter what we're doing, whether we're somebody in marketing or operations or customer success or 3D. And I think that's going to be something that just grows really, really fast. This opportunity for us to have conversations and chat with our computers in ways that we just haven't before. But as we think more and more about the way that AI is going to filter into our lives, right now, we want to cover some key themes that we're seeing out there as we talk to companies. Most of what Ashwin and I are doing right now is talking to companies about how to build AI assistants for their employees inside their companies that are private, secure, and protected. We've all heard in the recent months about companies that have told their employees not to use AI, have kind of shut that down, and are building their own versions, their own instances of AI for their own employees. And so one of the things that we've recognized is that LLM, or large language models, are not search. We've seen Microsoft come out with Bing search, Google come out with Bard. And so of people that don't understand AI and machine learning, there's this idea that, oh, this is just search on steroids. But it's really, really not. It's a much more integrated system that allows you, yes, you can search, and the AI assistant can go out and find information for you. But they can find information for you on the internet and inside your own company and search documents. But also they can generate things for you. And I think in XR, it's one of the things that people are the most excited about is how do we go from text to 3D models? How do we go from images to 3D models? How can we generate content really, really quickly in a way that we all know can be very difficult when you have to 3D model things from scratch? The second theme that seems obvious, that's true for most computer-related things, is garbage in, garbage out. And I think one of the skills that folks that are employees and entrepreneurs are going to need to have in the future to stay relevant is the ability to ask good questions. Because these models seem smart when you ask them questions, but they really are just recommender tools that are just recommending the next word, but they're doing it so fast that it seems that they are talking and chatting with you as a person, but it really requires that you're prompting your questions and the context by which you establish the conversation with these computers are really crisp and it's really important. So make sure that everything that you put in is not garbage and is really contextual. The third thing is that training models is really hard. Actually, training LLMs is really expensive and it's resource heavy. And one of the reasons why you see these big companies like OpenAI and Microsoft and Google and AWS kind of working with open source and proprietary models is that it took a long time. It took humans and it was very expensive to build those large language models. But now that we have them, we can build on top of them and do some really interesting things. So next slide. One big thing that we also see out there is language models can be wrong. And you've heard the term hallucination. I'm sure can make mistakes. And it's important to be clear about that so that you understand that one, context needs to be good going in, garbage out, as we discussed before. But also we need to make sure that humans stay in the loop when it comes to reviewing these models. And there's this tendency to want to just remove humans completely, but I do not think that that's something that's going to happen currently or for a very long time. We need to make sure that whatever we do inside these AI agents is reviewed. The fifth thing is around hype. We're in a hype cycle right now all of us in the XR community know what these hype cycles are like because we just felt one around the metaverse. We know that they spike and then they die down. We're going to see the same thing here. And so as you enter the AI space and think about this, it's a long tail. And I feel very confident and passionate about AI and its longevity. I think it's going to be here for a very long time. I also feel that same way about XR. And I think these two things are going to move together, but it's not going to happen overnight. And then the last thing is that, as I mentioned before, AI isn't new. This technology has been around for a really, really long time. Some of the ways that we communicate with the technology is new, but this has been around for a while, and we just need to recognize that as we ride these hype cycles.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about next is how can generative AI apply to the actual XR development lifecycle. We have three different buckets here. One is brainstorming and strategy, prototyping, and then the actual development. So first is the brainstorming and strategy, and this has less to do with XR and more about the things you do before you start building your solution. And so what we've kind of seen and what I've been using something like ChatGPT for is learning about a specific use case. I've built a couple different VR hard skills training programs where I need to go and understand that use case deeply. I need to go and understand that area, that pain point, what the frontline workers are actually doing before I build an experience. And while ChatGPT isn't going to take away an actual conversation with the end user or the customer, you can arm yourself better with information and knowledge before you actually get to that interview or that question. The other thing has been strategizing on requirements or how you're going to build the solution. And so some things that I've been using ChatGPT and BART for are one, can you help me understand the types of developers and the types of people that I need to build this actual application? And what is the pricing for an XR project? Or potential challenges, risks, and the mitigations. And this is something that's really important too, because I can usually think of risks and challenges that we need to address. But having something like ChatGPT, which has pretty good knowledge, can check my blind spots. And it can say, hey, by the way, you should think about this other risk that can come up in your solution. Then we have end-to-end deployment strategies. And if anyone has tried to deploy XR or kind of VR training or AR for industrial use cases, it can get pretty complicated between the training, the device management, getting on the network, managing the devices, storing the devices, troubleshooting the devices. And so again, like before, you can use an AI assistant to kind of check your blind spots and say, this is a great strategy, but don't forget about this specific thing, or where is the data being stored, or how is data flowing into the final destination. I've also been using ChatGPT for technical architecture, so the actual cloud services architecture or the architecture of the XR experience itself. And while I wouldn't delegate this whole thing to ChatGPT or an AI assistant, it can get you pretty close to where you need to go. And then you can have a conversation, you can learn a little bit about another tool that has come out or another thing that's part of your architecture, and then you can land on a final solution that you can use.
So the second thing we wanted to discuss was prototyping and the power of using prototyping and AI together. And I think this is true for 2D text and 2D images, different kinds of design in the 2D space, but also in the 3D space. When you think about the power of being able to have conversations with your AI assistant around rapidly creating many prototypes of a particular thing, whether it's furniture or a world or a character, as a designer, it gives you the opportunity to get 75, 80% of the way there, make some decisions, and then move forward. And it may mean bringing that object back into Blender and working on it manually. But you're able to go through so many more variations of the object and of the world before going back in and working on it manually. It just opens up a ton of possibilities for you, whether it's generating 360 skyboxes or 3D environments or otherwise. And maybe Ashwin can talk a little bit about the way that when he works with code, he's generating code quickly to prototype the actual code, whether it's Python or otherwise, to help him be more creative as a software engineer. Will you speak to that a little bit, Ashwin?
Yeah, so on the coding side, ChatGPT, Bard AI assistants, the generated code has been super helpful to get me about 60 or 70% of the way there. I think you still need to be, if you're going to be a coder, if you're talking about code, you still need to be somewhat technical because some of these assistants do create bugs and they don't necessarily know how to integrate with your entire system. And so because there is a context window, there's a limited number of information that this model knows at any given time, it can't actually understand your entire repository, especially if you have massive projects. And so you do still need to be a little bit technical. You can use this tool. It will definitely make your code generation or building a product significantly faster, but you need to get it to that last mile. You need to get that last 30% so you can ship a product. And then we'll touch on the development quickly. So on the same lines of prototyping, when you have figured out what you want to build, you can have generative AI inside of your development process. And so it goes back to code generation. We've seen this a little bit with Unity Muse coming out, where you can use natural language to accelerate your development, whether it's animations, whether it's textures, sprites. We're seeing things like text to music and sound. And so if anyone has built an experience where you have to go and look for sounds for a specific interaction, or generate voiceovers, you have a text way to do that now, which is much, much faster than before. Code generation we talked about, and eventually we'll start to see text to art and 3D models.
So I think that we're going to take a moment now to go over each one of these. I just want to outline these large use cases that we're seeing right now within XR and generative AI. And then we'll touch on these more specifically. But the big ones that we're seeing are around AI enhanced avatars. I know there's been a lot of demos that we've seen online of different variations of these characters. AI generated worlds, whether those are real time or not. Smart industrial mixed reality, where within an environment, as you're doing an action as a worker, that that AI is infused into that training experience. And then adaptive learning, same thing, where you're in a learning experience and dynamically, depending on your skills, things can be updating in real time with an AI assistant invisibly in the background. So I'll start with the AI enhanced avatars. So I think there's a lot of use cases for avatars that have AI voice associated with it. And if you think about gaming experiences where you're going to go up to characters in an environment and have short conversations with them, where you can populate an environment, that's going to be a big use case. I think being able to learn in environments where you have characters that can have conversations with you is another big use case. I recently saw a conversation in a shopping experience with an avatar character that was speaking to a human and having a pretty good conversation. There is some limitations right now to the speed by which the answers can happen. And there's also some limitations too around the uncanny valley of having these characters really feel real and look real. But we're getting really, really close to a world where you can have conversations, short conversations with these kinds of AI enhanced avatars that can be meaningful.
Awesome. So the next thing we'll talk about is the AI generated worlds. And so while this is still some time away and this is a little bit harder of a problem to solve, we can imagine being able to speak a world or type a world with text into existence. This means if I wanted to meditate in my own environment or I wanted to test my own environment, my own custom world, I can do that without being an artist. And I'm an engineer and I don't have art skills. Um, if I want to prototype an experience like we talked about before, generating a world can get me 50, 60, 70% of the way there. And then I can build out that final 30%, 40%. Now, it's not necessary that we would need to go from scratch, text to input, to a fully generated world. We can imagine a shopping experience where we generate only a small section of the virtual store. And that could be specific to a customer and things that the customer cares about. If we had a customer walk into our virtual store and said they're looking to buy a red shirt and blue pants, I can update only a small part of my environment that is specific and tailored to them. And so I'm taking an already existing environment as input and just generating or just changing a small part as my output. But again, I do want to highlight this is a harder problem to solve than just text to text because we have to generate worlds that are performant. But also, what you generate is what you're actually looking for, or what you had in mind. If any of you have tried text to image generation, you know that it takes some prompting. It takes a lot of skill there to get exactly what you're looking for. And if you add a third dimension, I mean, you're talking about generating animations, materials, textures, lighting, interactions, skyboxes. And so while it's a hard problem to solve, I do think we'll get there.
So next, we'll talk briefly about smart industrial AR. And so, when you think about this kind of industrial AR and training, this is more of a mixed reality experience that we're thinking about here, where, depending on what you need in that moment and what you're working on, the invisible AI assistant can be bringing up content for you. That content could be in the form of 2D screens. That content could be in the form of 3D objects that are being presented to you as you are going through either a linear approach in training or jumping around to different things. And I think that there's a few companies that are doing some really interesting things in this space, because the body of knowledge that needs to get reached into by some of these employees that are working on these systems are pretty large. And so being able to, in the moment, attack the information that you need and get it in the right times, and then be able to build, sometimes in real time, the 3D objects necessary to take the next step in the process is also really interesting. Next slide.
And the last thing we'll talk about is the adaptive learning. So many of the VR applications today, and even applications I've built, have generally been static in the sense that it's one specific use case that you need to be trained on. And when you've done it once or twice and kind of learned it, that application has served its kind of scoped purpose. But in the real world, you may have scenarios or use cases that have multiple combinations and different things that can go wrong if it's like a safety training. And so instead of hard coding it, we can think of a dynamic experience, again, integrating with something like an LMS or a skills profile, where we can change the environment based on where you are at your skill level, trying to keep the user at the edge of their skill level. And they're constantly learning. Um, so we talked about generating worlds, but can we generate specific parts of a training that's adaptive to the individual? The other part is we can also have an AI assistant inside of the environment. So not necessarily generating, but kind of like a Siri in your pocket while you're going through a training. And an AI assistant here can understand the context of a 3D environment. And so if we think about today's applications, we're using voiceovers, right? We're using things like we have a voiceover, you do some action, you do some work, part of the workflow, and then you move on to the next thing. It's a voiceover. And if I have a question in that moment, I can't actually ask my voiceover. But with an AI assistant that is trained or can or pulls from documentation related to the training, I can stop at any point in time and ask questions about that specific process. And if an AI assistant has perception and understands the 3D environment, it can say something like, turn your head to the left and look at this LED that's flashing. These LEDs flash when dot, dot, dot. And I can ask a question like, well, give me some more information about these LEDs, or give me some more information about what's going wrong.
So just to kind of circle back, at the beginning we talked about the ways that the visual layer, the glass that we happen to be on is going to function, and the way that this application layer, and we think about that as the AI agent, could be functioning invisibly, and then how that relates to these foundational elements. So we kind of want to finish talking about, I think, what a lot of people are excited about, which is on the hardware side, where we see things going and the way that we see XR feathering in.
Yeah, and so I'll start and then Boaz can wrap us up. So we've all seen the Vision Pro headset released by Apple, and there's a lot of good things there. That is validation from another big tech giant with this industry, and it adds another person in the mix, another competition, which is always great for the end user. Um, and the other less obvious things is more familiarity. Again, if you have tried to deploy some solutions out, you've probably reached some friction with end users not understanding the new paradigm, not understanding how to interact, struggling to get inside of the headset. And as more people enter the space and more solutions get built and more competition, we'll likely see more familiarity to the point where, we use mobile devices today and things are pretty much natural for us. We can eventually get to that point with XR devices. The other thing is the way that AI intersects here with XR is that when you think about the input paradigm, again, we've seen people struggle typing on keyboards or going through applications or going through things. And a great thing about AI is that you can speak to your applications, or maybe there's some prediction in there where you can essentially control the experience, control your applications with just your voice. And that's in some cases better than just using controllers. Um, so your AI assistant is abstracting away all that hard interaction from you. There is a long road ahead. I mean, we're trying to get to your, glasses that fit on your face that are pretty lightweight. Plenty of challenges on the hardware side, but also challenges on the software side. And if we think about something like mobile phones, took us 20-ish years to get to like a one-to-one human to mobile device. And XR is a little bit more complicated than mobile devices because you have something right on your face at all times. You have cameras that are kind of open to the outside world. And like I said, it's harder to interact with your thumbs, which are super quick, or even your fingers when you're typing on a keyboard, with just your hands if it's hand controllers or actual controllers for VR. But with all of those things, I'm still super excited and super optimistic about where we will see the XR space and how generative AI is going to kind of feather into that.
And I'll just finish by saying that, the image on the right is going to, I will be wearing these in the future. I've spent a career trying to put headsets on people's faces, and I understand where the friction is for a lot of people. And I think that the combination of XR and AI will help with some of that friction. As our hands and our eye tracking becomes better inside these headsets, we're going to live in a world where you're going to see a lot more people with these kind of empowered glasses on their face, and using their voice and conversation to interact with this hardware to be able to do some pretty amazing things, and augment their intelligence and augment their environment. So I'm pretty excited about it. And I think that I'm very optimistic after seeing some big players investing a lot of dollars on the hardware side, and then also all the engagement that we've seen on the software side in the last year, and all the work that's been done previous to that. So I think we'd like to, if we have time, would love to open it up to any questions that people have. We've covered a lot of stuff, and I know there's a lot of interest out there about AI and about XR. And so, yeah, I wonder from the hosts if we have an opportunity to answer any questions that are out there.
Absolutely. So if anyone has any questions, please type it in, and Boaz and Ashwin will try to answer it. By the way, thank you so much, Boaz and Ashwin. I was very mesmerized. Because I work in the art of the possible all day, every day in custom innovation. So this was very interesting, and it shows that you guys have put some thought into it as well. So thank you so much.
So Sarah, I know that you deal with 3D content all the time, and when you guys think about how some of the automation can play out in the work that you guys do, is this part of the conversation that you guys are having inside your company?
Yes, absolutely. In particular, I think the areas where you were talking about the adaptive learning, shopping experience with avatar characters, those are stuff that I think would be kind of, or building metaverses with AR generated worlds. Like those are the things that are very interesting to us, because we don't have a product. We try to solve a problem, and obviously, learning and training is a big area for a lot of these heavy industries, I must say. So that having that AI adoption, I think it shows ROI already without even being involved, because we know that it can help. So it would be a type of innovation that I think would be more of a no-brainer, that clients wouldn't even, I don't think they would think twice about it. And as opposed to other prototyping, I think retailers, for example, in my experience, are the fastest adopter of some of these latest technologies. So I'm not surprised that you've seen an AI avatar in a shopping experience. Yeah. So yeah, that's another area where it can be a gamified experience, that AI avatar, and I think the beauty of these technologies is it's not when you use them in silos, when you actually combine them together to create an experience, and imagine adding a layer of analytics to it, just like what Tony was talking about in the XR level things. That's when you can actually show something that's not gimmicky, and you're leveraging and harnessing that power that these advanced technologies have to improve human life.
Yeah.
So
the other thing about, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
Well, I was going to say the other thing about headsets and avatars is that, and we saw this in some of the videos when Vision Pro was announced, but if you have a headset on your face and you want someone else to see who you are, in a video conference call, and we're going to have to kind of recreate that experience and have you as an avatar being able to be as believable as possible. So I actually think that the two things together, using AI to generate that avatar, makes a ton of sense. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like people have too many questions. So I think we can wrap the session unless everyone has any questions. Roberto, I will add you. I will remove you guys. First of all, thank you so much. I will be in touch with both of you. It was very interesting chat. And I'm going to add Roberto to the stream. We just wanted to kind of say oh, there are questions in the Q&A tab. Oopsie.
Oh, the Q&A tab.
Sorry. So I fully admit that this is my first time, and I think for first time I did great. I did spend support with Hopin about a couple hours yesterday to figure out how to do this. But yeah, do you see any questions there, Roberto? Otherwise, I'm gonna.
It's just from Brad. Who are you watching for those AR glasses? That's what the question that came from Brad Seifert. I'm not sure if we have still Boaz in the backstage, but who are you watching for those AR glasses?
Yeah, so I think that there are some players out there that to keep an eye on. I think the big players like Meta, and I'm sure there's going to be iterations of the Apple headsets that have much more of a glasses kind of profile, but we're pretty far away from that being able to happen right now. And so, but I do think that there's some industrial players out there right now that are starting to do some things with floating displays that are pretty good. But I think the promise of having all the compute power in the glasses is pretty far away.
Thank you, Boaz. Okay, Roberto.
Yeah, especially the capacity to read the pupils, right? That's amazing from having a headset. And I have another one from Vinay. He's asking about the ability to generate these AI images in 3D, given how quickly it has to happen, right? Understand solutions that can take care of textures, mesh, material to be modified and reused. Have you seen how long will that take? Is it something close, few years? I think it's pretty close.
Can you restate the question again, real quick?
Yes, the question is, can the current solutions retain the realism at the same time as it's being optimized by the AI to load for real-time interactions?
That is good. That's a good question.
Yeah, so one of the things that I touched on is this is a hard problem, and it does take a lot of compute. Even with image generation today, it's not necessarily in real time. You're waiting a couple seconds for it to actually generate. And so when, like I said, when we talk about 3D environments, you're talking about texture, you're talking about lighting, you're talking about some kind of interaction, animation. That's a lot of computation that has to happen. And we haven't seen anything yet, and we may not see anything for a while. We're trending in a certain direction, but we may want to start exploring. I think some things have already been exploring for AI avatars, where the AI models are actually on the device, and you can get a little bit better latency. But again, even with that decrease in latency, you're still going to have tons of different steps to generate that real-time world. Now, we may get to see a not real-time generated world where you put in some input and you wait 30 minutes or something and you get a fully generated world, which is still faster than doing it by yourself today. Getting to the real-time portion will be a little bit more challenging.
And I think I have a question here. I see. Are you able to use 2D picture to stitch 3D objects using AI?
I have not seen any that do well.
Yeah,
The
we're
3D
still
space,
very early.
Yeah, the 3D space is hard because if you think about 2D, we have a ton of 2D image data. We have tons of it, whether it's in video form or it's just actual images, and it's easier to train models with a large amount of data. When you think about the amount of 3D data that exists in the world, it's very, very small relative to 2D and very, very small relative to text. So we still have some ways to go there. There are different things and patterns that people are trying, like can you take a 2D image and extrapolate and take multiple angles of a 2D of a image or of an object by images and convert it to 3D. And even then, that's not getting fantastic results. So that needs a lot of work as well.
Thank you, guys.
And with questions are coming in, Sarah, as we're trying to wrap up. The questions are coming in.
Yeah, I need to do the event to actually be able to see it.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go
ahead. I think I'm gonna try to combine two questions, and another one in terms of biometrics, ethical considerations in terms of housing biometrics, generative AI and XR, for-profit stickiness motives. So one is the liability of generating these AI agents, having all these inputs, right? Another is the ethical considerations out of it.
If the question is around using, if we're talking about generative AI, needs to, like, if you look at text to image, uses images that are maybe like copyright issues are all over the place with that. That is a big problem. That is a big debate. Trying to train a model on licensed material and getting a solid output is tough. And again, in 3D space, that's even harder.
I think that you're starting to see in the 2D space a paradigm that's going to show up in the 3D space. And Shutterstock just announced last week that they are guaranteeing that any image that you download from their site that is an AI image is going to be not stolen from an artist or otherwise, that it's going to be copyrighted, and they can guarantee that, and that they're not going to train their models on databases of imagery that are not copyrighted. And so I think you're going to see the same thing in the 3D space. So I think a lot of artists, 3D and 2D artists, are very wary of their materials being taken and used to train and then being sold by somebody else, which I think is fair. And so I think the Adobes and the Shutterstocks of this world are going to set the stage for that kind of fair use, and I think that's going to show up in the 3D space as well.
Perfect. Anything else, Sarah, that you want? 5 minutes. We can still use it.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Sorry, was were you about to say something?
I just want to thank you guys so much for the opportunity to talk to this group, and especially on the West Coast right now, we're really trying in Seattle to get people excited about getting involved in the chapter, and I'm also really excited about Vancouver and Seattle coming together to do some interesting events. So I just really appreciate the forum, and I appreciate folks coming out and listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I wanted to say something. I think I mentioned to one of you guys, but I timed the networking section to max at 5 minutes. And I went in there to just test it out. And I had 3 people telling me, why did you cap it to 5 minutes? I was halfway through conversation. Normally it's the other way around. You can't wait to get out of like a random conversation. And it was actually, to me, that's a KPI or indicator for success, because they were having actual good productive conversations that you wanted to have more of. So next time I'll try to make it longer. Apologies to anyone who got short. Hopefully you exchange contact information if you did, and reach out to me and I'll try to connect you. Roberto, were you about to say something?
Yes, I just want to thank Boaz and Ashwin for closing our first regional fest here in the VRARA West Coast. Thank you, Boaz. Boaz is an active advisor for the chapter as well. So thank you again for staying involved with the community and making sure that the chapter gets off the ground after the pandemic. It was completely no activity going on last year, and I appreciate the advice that you have been able to provide to me and Julia, and being an active member, showing up in person events. I invite anybody that is in Seattle to stay tuned to what we have prepared for the summer and for the fall. Very exciting events. Julia and I have been actively looking for anybody that has things to share and creating community, right? This what Boaz and Ashwin presented today is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot that goes into it. To your point, Sarah, it cannot be shared in just 5 minutes of networking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also encourage anyone here on the call from the Vancouver region to continue to get involved. My vision as the Vancouver chapter president is not to keep these events local. As you see, ever since I've come on board, I've tried a lot to encourage people to really connect globally, because I myself learn from these global events all the time. And XR is not a simple technology. You have to see these use cases that are happening globally to be able to design anything meaningful or exciting and learn from each other. So this is absolutely, I think, necessary beside being a fun thing to do. So absolutely going to have more. Yes. So Ashwin just shared the emails. Roberto and I also shared our emails, but our emails are also can be found on the VRARA website. If you are attending from Vancouver or Seattle or anywhere else in the world, you are not a member yet and you'd like to become a member, please reach out to Roberto and I, and we will help sign you guys up. And because you have been attending this event today, I would be able to extend a 20% discount to whoever is not a member who would like to become a member. So feel free to reach out. My email is easy, either sarah@intergalactic.com or vancouver@VRARA.com. And I think Roberto is roberto@VRARA.com. So very easy. Again, thank you guys.
Can I add one more last thing?
Yeah, sure.
So Ashwin and I produce a lot of free AI content that we put out there. And so I just wanted to kind of plug two things that we're doing that could provide a lot of value to members, absolutely free. One of them is every Tuesday morning, we produce a newsletter. If you go to simplyaugmented.com and just sign up, it's a free newsletter that goes over trends, tips, and use cases for all of this stuff. And we do it every single week. And it's for employers and employees that are interested in about this content. And then I'm the host of a podcast called Shift. And Shift is the ways that AI and the future of work are going to impact us. And it is an interview show where we interview tons of people about XR and AI. And you can check it out on your favorite podcast. So if you go to the simplyaugmented.com website, you can sign up for all of it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining and for speaking. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.